Now that we have addressed the question of what do I write about in a common application essay, I want to now get to the question of how do I write a common application essay. There are a few different ways to address this question, talking about writing style, structure, and then also the process itself of writing and then reviewing your essays. So I'm going to try my best to give you some quick tips to remember as we do this. When it comes to writing style, the first thing that's important to think about is that you need to show, not tell. Now, you've probably heard that a lot before from your English teachers and things like that, but what I'm getting at there is that instead of just like saying statements, you should be showing those statements by essentially using descriptive language, using details, describing, diving in deeper. So instead of just saying, it was warm out, you can say, I felt the sun warm my face as I stepped out and greeted the lovely breeze. That is certainly a very descriptive thing, and there are going to be parts of your essay where it's important to give detail like that, and there'll be other parts where it's not as much. But what I'm getting at here is that it's really not very engaging writing to just like make statements and have statement after statement after statement. Instead, there should be words that are a bit more descriptive, that bring the reader in. Because like I already said, the admissions officer has read a lot of essays. They do this for a job, not for fun. And they want to get through these. So what can you say that will captivate them, that will interest them, that will make them want to read more of your essay? Now we are going to get into the structure part of your essay. Before we begin this, I want to recognize that this is not a 5-paragraph essay for your sophomore honors English class. Instead, this is an essay that is really more of a story that is conveying a piece of who you are and why your admissions officer should want to admit you to their school. But beyond this, there is recognition of the fact that having structure to your essay will really help reinforce the points that you're trying to make throughout it. It'll help you gather your own thoughts, and it'll also help your admissions officer follow along and take away what they're supposed to take away from your essay. Now, the first element of what you're writing should be a hook. Now, a hook, if you don't know, is basically something that grabs the attention of your audience and makes them want to dive deeper in what you are writing. So, for example, if we were talking about a story from our childhood experience, that is kind of central to our essay, we might share like a short experience from that is one sentence that is a bit confusing and a bit misleading and will make our reader want to continue reading to figure out what exactly is going on. This is certainly something that is really more of a creative choice that you can take, but I would really recommend starting with some sort of strong hook at the beginning of your essay because, like I already said, your admissions officer is very busy. They have a lot of files they need to go through. So a hook is a great way to make a first impression on your essay that will make them want to slow down, take their time, and also take you seriously as a writer and as an applicant. The second piece of structure in this essay is going to be your thesis. The thesis can also be known as the so what, because I think that is a bit more relevant to what we're talking about in these types of essays. Because oftentimes when we talk about theses, people think it needs to be a sort of sentence that is structured in a certain way, like you might have for an AP test. That's not necessarily what this is. The thesis, or the so what, is really getting at this question that I've already addressed earlier, which is, what is a detail about yourself that reveals something greater about you that then shows how you're ready or prepared for whatever institution you're applying for? The thesis, or the so what, is really what you want your admissions officer to leave your essay remembering about you. You want it to be the central focus of your essay. What I would do really is, once you've written this thesis and feel pretty good about it and have written your entire essay as a whole and have edited it a few times, I would go to someone that you trust, someone like a teacher or a counselor, and have them read over your essay and then ask them to highlight where the thesis is. And if they highlight something that isn't the thesis, I would recommend going back and trying to flesh that out a bit more or emphasize it a bit more. Just doing something to make sure that you are clearly conveying what you want to clearly convey. The third component of the structure of your essay should be a series of moments. Now, what I mean by moments is kind of just alluding to the fact that your admissions officer is reading so many essays that they need something to remember you by. They need distinct moments in your essay, things that happen, things that you talk about, that they can remember and refer back to as they are vouching for you later down the road. These moments could be stories that are individual stories within the sort of greater narrative that you're sharing within your essay. These moments could be thoughts that you have. They could be people in your life. They really could be anything, but the whole point is that you want to have certain like little punches in your essay that stand out, that are kind of the equivalent of like evidence and argument that you would have in a typical 5-paragraph essay. But due to the structure of this and the nature of just telling stories, it doesn't need to be so formal. We will get in later with the moments that I have in my own essay. The fourth and final component of your essay that I'd recommend having in the structure is a conclusion. And of course, not every essay needs a conclusion, but I would suggest having it because it gives you space to kind of reflect on what you're talking about throughout the entire essay, maybe allude back to specific moments that you want your reader to remember. And so repeating it again will help them remember that it's important. It's also a good place to kind of tie up loose ends that you may have mentioned maybe at the beginning of your essay that you want to refer back to kind of create a sense of cohesion amongst the entire story. It's a good place to refer back to your thesis again, so that, again, it's obvious and the reader can remember it. Really, the conclusion can be however long as you want it to be and include however many new thoughts as you want it to. But basically, it's something that will allow you to, I think, just kind of wrap everything up in a nice bow, which again helps with the whole narrative piece of the common application essay. Finally, we're going to get into how to actually go through the process of writing this common application. Now we know what to write about and we know how to write it, but how do we go about the process of actually figuring out like what our final draft is and reviewing it and everything like that? So the first step that I would recommend is to just write. Just use brainstorming tools to basically flesh out a bunch of ideas. What I would do is I would look at online tools that are available to suss out basically a bunch of ideas about important things that have happened in your life, important lessons that you have learned, people that are important to you, experiences that are important, all of this stuff. And what that does is it gives you a lot of starting ideas for this common application essay, but also gives you a lot of material to use down the road when you're writing supplementals as well. Then what you do is basically I would begin by fleshing out maybe 24 ideas for what to write about, and then choose maybe 5 to go into more detail with. And then finally, after that, after fleshing them out a little bit more, maybe having 1,000 words or so for each of them, then finally choosing one to really invest in and have a better draft of. What's important here too is that in different applications, you might have more opportunity to talk about something that maybe you want to go more in depth in for your supplemental, and so instead you don't want to talk about for your common application. So there's a lot of different things to balance out here, and also recognizing the fact that you don't want to alter your entire common application for just one college application, especially considering that you might be applying to multiple schools. These are all important things to keep in mind, but really the essence of this first point is to just write, just brainstorm, don't think too hard, don't worry about word limits, but instead just like let your ideas have room to breathe, and then later go back and start thinking about which ideas are actually the best or the most intriguing or the most appropriate, and then worrying about word counts and things like that. Then after we have this idea of what you're going to talk about and you've fleshed that out and then you've written this essay, you're going to get at the point where you are reviewing your essay and you're starting to go over for grammar and clarity and things like that. What I'd really stress here is to not have too many people look at your essay. Once you have more than maybe 3 or 4 people read your essay, you're going to start having way too many opinions that at that point is just noise. You are the author of this essay, and really you should be trusting your gut and what you think. And the important thing about that is that you need to be trusting also the people who you believe in and who you trust to be good reflectors of good criticism in this essay. So think about English teachers that you are close with, or maybe school counselors that you are close with, or maybe friends that you know that are really good writers who have already gone through the college application process and might be a year or so older than you. Also within reviewing, I would suggest not reading other people's essays. It really won't help you. Of course, this is a bit ironic because I'm going to be sharing my essay with you, but that's because this is more of a lesson, and knowing myself and other students that were my age when we were all applying to school, it's really tempting to just read people's essays, and really it won't make you feel much but bad about yourself and unnecessarily insecure. So I would just avoid that, because part of this whole thing too is that feeling confident about the essay that you've written is like so much of what ends up selling it in the end is you should feel good about what you've written. And this whole process is something that takes a lot of hard work, and You deserve to feel proud of what you have produced. And so don't ruin that by reading through what other people are talking about, because that's on them. And it could be a great essay or it could be a terrible essay. And the final thing I want to say is also just something to keep in mind, which is that this whole essay is read between like 4 to 7 minutes. So it's important to think about the details and spend your time on it, but also understand that there are a lot of things that might just go straight over the heads of the admissions officers. So really don't spend like a ridiculous amount of time on it, because there are a lot of things that maybe you're thinking about that the admissions officer just like really won't be at all.